In this video, we're going to deal with IELTS Academic Writing Task 1, line graphs. And in fact, this is just a single line graph in this video. We're going to analyze the task carefully together. We're going to learn the method and structure. This method and structure we use for every task 1, and you're going to see it in all of the methods videos. We'll review the marking criteria and analyze a high-level sample. Let's start with our task. Now, here are the instructions that you always get with a writing task 1. They say you should spend about 20 minutes on this task. Inside the box, summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Every task 1 contains that same piece of information. Write at least 150 words, so minimum 150 words. Here are our task-specific details. The graph below shows average carbon dioxide or CO2 emissions per person in the United Kingdom, Sweden, Italy, and Portugal between 1967 and 2007. Before we even see the graph, you should recognize straight away we're going to be looking at change over time here from 1967 to 2007. And here is the graph. Pause the video now if you want to have a quick look, but we're going to analyze it more carefully together in a moment. I want to talk first about the method. For any task 1 that you encounter on test day, this is the method we recommend. To begin, you need to analyze and plan and spend about 3 minutes on this. Don't rush through this stage. Then follow the structure I'm going to show you and write with the criteria in mind. So the actual writing part, 15 minutes for that. Finally, check your work. Edit carefully, 2 minutes for that. So 3, 15, and 2. Let's do step 1 together, analyze and plan. Now we're dealing with a single line graph here, but the more important thing to keep in mind is that we're dealing with change over time. So it actually doesn't matter if it's a line graph, a bar chart, pie chart, tables. If you're dealing with change over time, there are certain things that you're always looking for. Firstly, let's have a look at the elements of the graph. So we've got our heading here, average carbon dioxide emissions per person. So not per country, per person from 1967 to 2007. Our dates are down here on the bottom. 67, 77, 87, 97, 2007. Up the side, we've got emissions in metric tons, so pay careful attention to this. Sometimes this will say in thousands or in millions, so you need to look really carefully. So 2 metric tons, 4 metric tons, all the way up to 12. And we've got our 4 countries, the UK, Sweden, Italy, and Portugal. Now, change over time means that we want to know what happened over that period of time? What changed? So look at the trends. What went up and what went down? So you can see just by having a quick look that emissions in the UK, which is the top line here, they were high throughout the period, but they did drop a little bit. Also, Sweden, so the amount of carbon dioxide, it went up here, but overall, from start to finish, there was a big drop in the emissions. On the other hand, or in contrast, you can see this upward trend in Sweden and in Portugal. So 2 clear trends are happening here. The UK and Sweden down, Italy and Portugal up. Now that is vital for this kind of task. Second thing to look at is the position of the elements. Did the elements change position? So what I mean by that is, here we've got the UK at the start was the highest emitter per person, and it remained so throughout the period. So it didn't drop to be the final, the lowest emitter, for example. But you can see that Sweden had quite a noticeable drop. It was it had the second highest emissions in 1967, and then it was equal last by the end of the period. So quite a dramatic shift. So the questions to ask yourself to begin with, whatever you're looking at, what went up, what went down, sometimes what stayed the same, and did the elements change position significantly from start to finish? Now, all of that is going to inform our overview and our body. So let's look at the structure that we're going to follow. Again, this is the same structure regardless of what you get in task 1. Even a process or a map, we still follow the same structure. The introduction first, then the overview, then a paragraph or 2, usually 2, describing the details or the key features. So now you're ready to write, but just one more thing to keep in mind, you always need to write with the criteria in mind. And remember, they are task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, grammatical range and accuracy. Be sure to review the video on marking criteria if you're not fully across these, but I'll give you a quick summary here. And this is the checklist that we use in our live classes, and you're going to see it in all of the methods videos as well. These are the things that you have to do if you want to score band 7 and higher. Pause and have a quick look now, and we're going to use this to go through our sample in more detail shortly. I'm going to show you a sample now, and I want you to just pause the video and have a look at how I've organized my information. I want you to notice the introduction, have a look at the overview, and then there are 2 key features, 2 body paragraphs. I want you to look at how I've divided the information in those paragraphs. What did I put in key features 1 and what did I put in key features 2? Here's the sample. Pause the video now and have a look. So hopefully you could see clearly the introduction and the overview which contained no details but a broad statement about what happened during that period. And then the key features are divided according to the trends. Now this paragraph starts in 1967. People in the UK were the biggest polluters, responsible for almost 11 metric tons of CO2 each. The next highest emitters were the Swedes, so that's here, the UK, the Swedes, with around 8.5 metric tons each, which was almost double the output of the average Italian and 16 times more than a person in Portugal. So in that first part, I've described all of the positions and the starting points of all 4 countries. So what happened in 1967? That's the beginning of key features 1. Then I take the top 2. So I'm looking here at trends. Remember that 2 of the trends are up and 2 of the trends are down. So I've followed the UK and Sweden to the end of the period. So starting position of everything and then follow one of the trends. So in this case, I've gone on to describe what happened in the UK. CO2 output fell steadily over the next 40 years. So that's this. And despite a surge in the 70s, people in Sweden also cut their emissions dramatically until by 2007, they accounted for only around 5 metric tons each. So I've mentioned this rise here and the dramatic fall. And so obviously my next key features paragraph, the end of my task, I'm going to deal with the other 2. So I have to say, well, what happened in Italy and Portugal? By contrast, after 1967, emissions increased from Italy and Portugal. So now I'm dealing with these 2. And by the end of the given period, Italy was the 2nd highest polluter. Notice it changed position with almost 8 metric tons. And in Portugal, though it was still the lowest emitter, along with Sweden, just under 6 metric tons per person were generated. So then I've dealt with this. And that's a really good way to deal with any change over time graph. Introduction, of course, the overview, which describes the main trends, the ups and downs, maybe the position changes. And then in your key features, start at the beginning and follow one of the trends. And the next paragraph, the other trends. Simple. Let's look a little more deeply now at this task according to the criteria, and we'll start with task achievement. So over here on the left, I've got those checkpoints from our simplified criteria list. Let's run through each one and I'll show you how the task meets or exceeds these criteria. Firstly, have I presented a clear overview of main trends, stages, or differences? In the criteria, it says main trends, stages, or differences. In our particular task here, we're really interested in trends, the main trends. So my overview is here. Overall, it is clear that although the UK produced the most CO2 per capita, so per person, output fell there and in Sweden over the period. Okay, so I've mentioned here the fact that the UK was the top all the time and the drop in Sweden and UK's output. Meanwhile, there were significant rises in the emission levels from people in Italy and Portugal. And again, I've just described generally, emissions went up. Notice in this part of the task, no numbers, no details. The examiner is looking for your overview. It's a critical piece of the criteria. So if they see numbers in there, that's not an overview. Also, notice I've put overall. It is clear that this language is a good signal to the examiner, telling them here is my overview, don't miss it. So have I presented a clear overview of the main trend stages differences? Definitely yes. Just once again, when you're dealing with an overview for change over time graphs, these are the questions to ask yourself. What went up? What went down? What was the highest at the start and the end? So in this case, it was the UK throughout. And did the positions change over the time? Did one element overtake another element? Second thing in our checklist is to mention all the elements. Now, in this case, the elements are the 4 countries. You must refer to them somewhere in your task, and I've definitely done that. Next checkpoint, present and highlight each key feature. So imagine that you were describing this graph to somebody who couldn't see it. What are the critical pieces of information that you can't miss? What is really important to mention? So that means not every single little up and down, and not every number, of course. We don't want to know in each 10-year block. But if you were describing this to someone, what do you think is important to mention? So these are what I would consider the key features. The fact that people in the UK were the biggest polluters, the next highest emitters were Swedes in 67, and then that drop in output in both countries. The other key features that I would mention are the increase in emissions from Italy and Portugal, that change from Italy going from the 3rd to the 2nd position, and also the fact that Portugal was still the lowest emitter despite that rise. So those are the key features to my mind. Next stop point is data. Have I used data? And again, this is a critical part of the criteria. If you write a beautiful task, but there are no numbers or no specifics, you can't score band 7 and above. So have I used data? Yes, you can see it over here. 11 metric tons, 8.5 metric tons, 5 metric tons, 8 and 6. That is data. And of course, it will be different for every task that you get. Have I reported accurately? Yes, I have. So again, make sure that you haven't put the wrong country by mistake, or you haven't misunderstood the numbers down the side. That can also affect your score. Coherence and cohesion. Have I organized my information logically? So yes, and following the structure is a great way to ensure that. Intro, overview, key features 1 and key features 2, and keep in mind that structure that I mentioned within the key features for change over time. What happened at the beginning? Follow one of the trends. Second paragraph, follow the other trends. Have I used paragraphs? Well, obviously I have. You can see them. Have I used a range of linking devices appropriately? So linking devices, what are they? You should think of them in 3 separate categories. So there are conjunctions, there are conjunctive adverbs, and there are references and relative pronouns. Big words, I know, but the actual words themselves, the linking devices, you already know them, I'm sure. Conjunctions are words like this. And, so, but, before, after, while, although, because, until, once, and when. So these words stick sentences together or stick clauses together. Conjunctive adverbs are a little bit different. So one of them, a common one, is however. Now, however actually does not work like the other conjunctions. It doesn't stick two clauses together. Instead, you can start a sentence with this word, however, comma, blah, 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 or you can put it inside a sentence surrounded by commas. For example, In the UK, comma, however, comma, output fell. Some other conjunctive adverbs are nevertheless, finally, furthermore, then, next, consequently, hence, thus, and likewise. Now, these conjunctions and conjunctive adverbs are sometimes confused, but make sure that you keep them separate in your mind and use a combination of both through your task. The third column is references and relative pronouns. These are words like it, they, that, these, those, them, such, ones, which. Again, words that I'm sure are very familiar to you, but you might not think of them when you're thinking about linking words. However, these are probably the most effective linking words. They stick your sentences together smoothly and naturally. So in my task, have I used a range of linking devices appropriately? Yes, so look at these linking words. Although, there, and meanwhile, conjunctive adverbs, see the comma here. The next highest emitters, which, however, and despite, until, they, by contrast, by the end, though, along with Sweden. So a big variety of linking words used, very important to score band 7 and above. Lexical resources next. This is vocabulary. I've got 3 things on my checkpoint here. Have I demonstrated a wide range of vocab? So describing change over time, just be careful you don't overuse a word like increase. You know, it increased, someone else increased, increase, increase, increase. You need to say the same thing in a variety of ways. Okay, so here are some of the examples of variety or range of vocabulary. So emissions of carbon dioxide, produced the most CO2 per capita, output fell, significant rises, biggest polluters, responsible for, next highest emitters, fell steadily, surge, cut their emissions dramatically, accounted for, and so on. So you can see not too much repetition in there. Check your own work by reading it out loud, and if you notice the same word coming up again and again, try to replace it. The second points are mainly about precision. So have I used vocabulary accurately or precisely? Have I used correct spelling? Yes, I have. Grammatical range and accuracy. First thing is, have I demonstrated a wide range of structures? So just like vocabulary, you need to show the examiner what you've got. Here are some examples. So one structure that I've used is comparatives or superlatives. The most, biggest polluters, superlatives. The next highest emitters, 16 times more than the second highest polluter, the lowest emitter. So that's just one structure that I've used throughout. Another one is the passive voice. So look at this sentence here. Under 6 metric tons per person were generated. Now, I added this because I wanted to demonstrate variety. So that's why you need to write with this checklist in your mind. Be careful that you don't end up with a beautiful task, but it's all simple sentences. You need to demonstrate range. Another thing I've included is relative clauses. For example, the next highest emitters were the Swedes with around 8.5 metric tons each, which was almost double the output of the average Italian. So this is my relative clause, which was almost double the output. Second thing on the dot point list is complex structures. And here are a bunch. I've got a sentence with although. Relative clauses are complex sentences too. So my sentence with which, and another one here with the word though. And again, the final 2 points here relate to accuracy. Have I used my grammar accurately? Minimal errors. And have I used punctuation correctly? So check your commas and your full stops. So once you've written your task, you need to spend a little time editing, particularly editing for grammar and vocab errors. Once again, here is the checklist to use. Take a screenshot, keep it on you as you plan, write, and edit your own tasks. And let's quickly recap that method. It's a simple one. You're going to analyze and plan for 3 minutes, Follow the structure, so intro, overview, key features, write with the criteria in mind, and finally, check your work at the end. So now you know what to do. It's your turn to practice with our activities.